When you're running a business, there's definitely some merit to the who, not how line of thinking. I need to do it more myself, frankly. I think if you know that you're the type of person who does like to learn or who does like to challenge themselves, I think that's where the real benefit comes from. So there's a certain, when we give ourselves these self-limiting beliefs of I can't do something or I'm not capable of something, that's very different from I don't want to do something. And it's the things that you think you can't do that I think are worth exploring and trying to get down to the core and really asking yourself, why do you think that way? At what point in your life did you start telling yourself that?
Hi, everyone. This is Joshua Hoffman and Alex Garashenko, and welcome to another episode of the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast, where we deconstruct the why and how agency owners found their success, and in season 3, discuss how to build a community and a referral network. Today, I have Skyler Reeves, the founder and CEO of Ardent Growth, a marketing firm that helps B2B brands capture their total searchable market and accelerate go-to-market with a unique RevOps framework that lays on top of your existing HubSpot instance. Welcome, Skyler.
Thanks for having me.
And your very fancy podcast room there, which is worth highlighting. It's very nice. But where I want to selfishly start is a topic that I care a lot about. We talked about this last time, which is philosophy. And we don't have to take up a lot of time on this, but I just want to understand why you're interested in philosophy. And the second part of that is, which philosopher would you recommend people start with if they just want to get into the topic?
Yeah. So, as far as why I'm interested in it, I think most people are at some level, right? I think we, especially when we're kids, we ask a lot of why questions, and that kind of gets stamped out of us, as we go through elementary or primary and secondary school. But after I got out of the military, I went to college and wanted to pursue computer science and tax philosophy on there along with it, because the military was footing the bill. So I was like, so did a few different majors throughout the whole time, and I don't know, it was a good chance to learn, a good chance to explore, ask deeper questions, get to know myself, and also really work through how to think critically, how to think through things logically and coherently. As far as where to start, oh gosh. Honestly, I think a good place to start is sometimes starting with the history because a lot of the questions themselves are more accessible if someone is just, asking questions about what's the point of existence, et cetera. But a good place to kind of get a grasp that's very accessible and easy to understand is Bertrand Russell wrote The History of Western Philosophy. He does a pretty good job of making it fairly lucid to understand. So I think getting a good overview of philosophy and the various thinkers and the way thought has evolved over time is a good place. It's a good introduction to get a lot of exposure. But I know a lot of people start with, say, Aurelius with the meditations, things like that. Those resonate, I think, a lot with business owners. So
that was great. Great recommendation too. And the last time we spoke, just to change the subject now, you shared an interesting story. I'll help you remember if you need it, about how you actually focus on things that you're bad at, and then you eventually turn them into a strength. And I don't know if you remember, but it was about being like bad at math, which led to algorithm design, and then eventually SEO. Okay, awesome. But a lot of self-help books and all that kind of stuff, they actually usually say like you should double down on what you're good at and then hire skills that you're bad at. So I guess my question there is, can you actually just share why you think it's important to kind of do the reverse and share why you want to focus on things you're bad at?
So I don't think it's an either or. I think it's an and scenario. I think it's when you're running a business, there's definitely some merit to the who, not how line of thinking. I need to do it more myself, frankly. I think if you know that you're the type of person who does like to learn or who does like to challenge themselves, I think that's where the real benefit comes from. So there's a certain, when we give ourselves these self-limiting beliefs of I can't do something or I'm not capable of something, that's very different from I don't want to do something. And it's the things that you think you can't do that I think are worth exploring and trying to get down to the core and really asking yourself, why do you think that way? At what point in your life did you start telling yourself that? What evidence do you have to support that you can't do something? And to kind of highlight, the story there was that I was historically did poor in math. I think pretty sure the only way I graduated high school was George Bush's "No Left Behind," No Child Left Behind Act or whatever. So
Same.
I went and joined the military, and in hindsight, it's like I went through medical school, through the military, trauma medicine, things like that. Learned a ton about anatomy and medicine and treating people and saving lives, and while simultaneously learning tactics. I was with the infantry, so it wasn't anything super extreme on the intelligence side or anything, but just kind of know how to kick down doors. But towards the end, I came across Carol Dweck's book, Mindset. It's where the growth mindset comes from. Read it, and it was such a light bulb moment for me that I was like, maybe I'm not bad at math. Maybe I'm just lazy. And I remember thinking to myself, I was like, I've spent at this point 20-ish years learning English. I feel like I've, mastered it to some extent. I was like, imagine if I'd spent 20 years learning math. Like, I'm sure I would be significantly better than what I am currently. And so I kind of set a goal to say, all right, I'm gonna go learn math. And I think I remember I started back at fractions again at the time. And I was doing Khan Academy because it was free and it was just a great resource that was available. So self-taught myself all the way through calculus and into linear algebra. And then right after that, went to university and ended up getting a computer science degree and designing algorithms. And now I love math. I'm not, I tell people it's not like I'm great at math, but I enjoy it now. I've learned to enjoy what comes with learning it, what comes with hard work. And that's really applied across a lot of things ever since then. It's, but again, I think it comes back to saying, don't give yourself these self-limiting beliefs that you can't do something, but also being aware that if you don't want to do something, if you don't enjoy it, and you don't enjoy it for the right reason. So I didn't enjoy math, not because I just inherently hated it. I didn't enjoy it because I wasn't good at it. And there's a very clear distinction there, I think. And so that's worth exploring sometimes, to ask yourself, maybe try, especially like my litmus test is, would I be proud of telling anybody that I'm not good at this, or that, a lot of people, we go around now, we say things like, oh, I'm bad at math, and no one really cares. But imagine if you went around saying, I'm bad at reading. It would have a very different stigma to it, right? So that's my litmus test now, is to ask myself, would I feel good being able to say, I've gotten better at this? And if that's the case, then maybe I should explore it a bit, because maybe inside, I do want to be better and I'm just afraid to. So.
Well, this is my opportunity to mention one of my favorite things, and if we'll see how far we go in this. But I have this thing where I think, I'm obsessed with learning what makes a successful person. And Alex, you've heard me kind of bring this up once or twice, but whether I'm right or wrong, what I think I boiled it down to is self-awareness, which turns into motivation, which turns into discipline. And one, I want to hear your general thoughts on that. But the question that I actually was going to ask before I thought of that is, what pushes you through the tough parts of learning something like that? And that's what made me think, oh, is it this little cycle of self-awareness, motivation, and discipline? But just wanted you to talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's it probably comes, a lot of it has to do with how you're looking at both the micro and the macro simultaneously sometimes. So in the micro, I don't think about the macro, and I just think about what's the small win. But if I do feel like I'm kind of hitting against a wall, whether I'm trying to, in the world of software development, it's a lot of times you're solving novel problems, unless you're just, just on a team somewhere, just banging out code for somebody. But in that world of solving novel problems, you're always going to hit a brick wall at some point, and there's always something that goes wrong. You got to troubleshoot. You got to figure out. You don't even know how to approach the problem. And I think what helps me push through there is the experience of, I look back and I say, things may be hard, but if I just start to calculate up the progress that I've made over a year, you start to realize what that gulf looks like. And so I remind myself of that sometimes and say, of course, like nothing's ever easy when you first started, right? Like we all suck when we first start something. Like that's just how it goes. But with enough effort, I know that like I'll get better. I will improve. Like, was it Hormozy puts this pretty well. It's like, what would I have to do such that it would be unreasonable that I wouldn't improve or get better at this. So that's, yeah, I kind of think about that and I'm just like, well, yeah, no, if I push through it, like I'll get better over time and it'll still always suck in the moment. But if I reflect back, you'll be able to see the progress and the growth, and that can definitely be motivating. So
that was great. Do you ever have friends, girlfriends, wives, whatever, significant others that get annoyed with your I speak for myself with philosophy quotes, because sometimes I say them, people are like, man, I don't want to hear that right now, but like it's done so good for me, like so much good for me that like I usually want to share it, but people usually don't want to hear it. Do you have the same thing at all?
yeah, then I did for a while, and then I just stopped being around those people. So
that's what I did.
That was my general solution. I went through. I've been through, had a lot of different relationships, right? And I finally found somebody who supports it, right? She may not care about it, but she doesn't complain. She gets it, and that's, I think, a big thing for me too is just, and I think everybody should reflect on this periodically, is nothing says that you have to be around people who aren't helping you grow, who aren't helping you be better, who are trying to hold you back or want to complain about who you are, right? So sometimes, like, I mean, if you don't care, go for it. Like, who cares? Be around those people, right? But if you feel frustration, if you feel anxiety, don't put yourself in those situations. Like, you're not beholden to anybody. You don't have to be around those people. Just cut them out of your life.
Well, I'll end that with a quote, which is be strict on yourself and lenient on others, which I think is Marcus Aurelius, if not a Stoic person. So, all right. So now I'm going to guess that we're going to get some more philosophy in here, which is just my dream. So keep with the quotes and everything. I want to get a little bit into the nitty gritty stuff. And I understand that we talked last time and you recently shifted your thought process towards, like productivity instead of utilization. So can you kind of just explain what that means and how it's impacted your firm?
Yeah. So I spent all throughout college, I was very obsessive about tracking how I was spending my time. I had everything organized, knew exactly what I was doing, and that worked well because I was in a very structured environment. You have class at XYZ time. If you're doing a full course load is, you get your 3 credit hours and you're supposed to spend something like 4 times that studying, right? And so it made it very easy. The structured people were planning my day for me, more or less. When the corporate world worked in business for somebody else, same thing. You've got structure. Then started my own business and things just went to complete shit after that. And so I spent 3 years trying to solve this utilization problem, not only for myself of productivity, but also for our team and trying to maximize like what's the value we're able to get out of people, within reason. And I was constantly just fighting this problem. There was never a good solution. And it wasn't always just based off of the limitations of tools, right? I think I've gone through every project management tool in the market. And at a certain point, you have to kind of step back and say, if you're constantly just running into this friction, maybe you're thinking about the problem wrong. And that's something you talk about self-awareness, like at least once a year, I try to sit down and really like question all my fundamental beliefs just to make sure that I'm not like living in like dogma. And I got a little bit earlier with that one this year and kind of said, maybe I'm just not looking at this problem right. Maybe, there's got to be some sort of underlying problem here. And so I said, let me step outside of the Western sort of general mantra of how to approach work, how to approach productivity, how to approach, the way we approach business and leadership and management, and went and looked at what they teach in the East, which is also a great thing to do with philosophy periodically too. There's a lot of emphasis on Western philosophy, but you can go to Eastern philosophy now and then and learn a thing or two as well. And so I went and studied, how they did it in Japan, and came across something I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with, like lean management and the principles of Toyota and Kanban, things like that. And the tricky part was most of the information available, if you're looking for it online, had been completely bastardized by the West, where we wanted to take the fundamental philosophy or the fundamental system and just layer just completely like bogus or misapplied like management structures and artifacts on top of it. And so I had to kind of like parse through that and get all that out of the way and try to really get down to the core. And when I did, it just all of a sudden it made sense. So a few things that we started applying here internally was, historically we had focused on utilization, right? So you're looking at capacity and utilization. You got so many hours a team can work in a week, right? Across your team. How can we maximize utilization so that we're reducing our overall liability in terms of the cost that we're spending on this, because it's a fixed cost. You're paying it, whether they're working or not, especially if they're a full-time employee, if they're W-2 or you have them on some sort of fixed payment schedule, salary, et cetera. And so when you go down that path, one of the things that you're typically want to do, a lot of agency owners, they want to track time, right? They're like, hey, track your time on your tasks. And there was constant, even when people wanted to adopt it, including myself, right? Which I was never even good at doing it either. And if I can't do it, how can I expect everyone else to do it? But even when people weren't necessarily against the idea of doing it and they wanted to do it, like it was always, you didn't know if it was accurate, or they forget to do it here, or they forget to do it there, or like the data's not right. And we knew it, right? And it's like, if the data's not going to be right, why are we measuring this? And so there was sort of two things there. I realized, one, I was like, you have to accept that not all data is going to be perfect, and maybe you're trying to get too granular, so don't get too granular on things. And two, maybe we need to step back and ask ourselves, are we measuring the right thing? And so from Kanban, what I took away from it was we shifted the focus from utilization to throughput. So looking at the way, like throughput being like, how many things did we actually finish? Because this is something I think a lot of agencies run into a problem with, is they'll start a lot of different things, and but how many things are they actually finishing, right? How many projects do you have sitting on the shelf? You're waiting on client feedback. You're waiting on, a team meeting. You're waiting on, I'm going to get to that one day, because you don't really want to mess with it. And, you procrastinate, et cetera, right? And so it just sits there. And as it sits there, like there's costs that are incurred with that too. Like when you pick back up a project you haven't touched in a while, like you have to reorient yourself, right? It's like the macro level of context switching. And so we shifted our focus to throughput, because I said, okay, throughput is effectively saying how much value, right, are we delivering to the customer? These are actual finished work products, right? It's like tangible, realizable value delivered to the customer. It isn't something that, hey, we finished this item, and ask yourself, would a customer want to pay for that? Are they going to be happy to receive that? And if they don't, we kept consolidating it up until it reached a point where you bundle things together and it's an actual, something of real value that a customer is happy to receive. And so that shift from thinking about cost and utilization and maximizing, like I said, the cost center of internally within the business, instead of focusing on how much value am I delivering to customers, how quickly can I deliver that value to the customer, completely changed. Not only how much work we're getting done, because at first I thought, okay, if we're only going to limit ourselves to working on one thing at a time, right? Like each team, it's like it's the whole mantra is stop starting, start finishing. And so we work on one thing until it's finished. And no one's ever waiting around with nothing to do, because if they are, they can go help somebody else swarm a particular thing and get it done faster. And that tends to be the way we approach it. And we always start from right to left. So you start with the thing that's closest to being finished in the pipeline, and then work your way, towards what we call a backlog, right? And at first I thought, okay, if we limit ourselves to working on one thing at a time, like we're not going to get nearly as much done. Like we're going to be behind, but I said, like, well, fuck it, we're behind half the time anyway. Like, what do we got to lose, right? And so that's what we did. And believe it or not, we actually got more things done, and our mental health definitely improved. Like I was working like 16-hour days, and now I work like 8 to 9-ish, right? And the team as well, like some of our teams on salary, they were working 10-hour days, and now they're working, 7.5, 8. If they get, they got their stuff done, it's like, I go home, I don't care, right? and or log off or whatever. And so it's definitely helped our mental health. It's improved the overall mood, and we've gotten a lot better at being able to predict how long something's going to take. So one of the things that's, once you begin to track data and you think about what's a work item age, work item age is how many days has this been in flight, in progress, being worked on, right? So we track that. Instead of trying to track time at a granular hour, minute level, we just think of it as basically half a day to a day. You move a task from to do to doing, right? And when it goes from doing to review, or review to done, or however you have your column set up based on that system, we can just use the timestamps between, well, it's set in doing for 1.5 days or however many hours it was, just extract that into days, and before it went to done. And that tells me how long it took, right? The actual full cycle time, not just the active time that you were actually working on the task itself. And so when we did that, then we're able to calculate things like flow efficiency. How efficiently are we actually moving things through the pipeline? And if this sounds absurd, here's an example of what this looks like in practice. So obviously, like stuff like McDonald's, right? Like works in a very like flow type system, right? People do one particular thing most of the time, right? It moves left to right, from order to customer. Something that doesn't are things like hospitals and airports. Mm. And I think we all know what it's like to like sit and wait. They start calling, group 1 for the airport. You get up because you're in group 1, but you got group 2, 3, and 7 in front of you, right? And you're waiting there, and you rush to get in, go through TSA. Like it inverts the system where the airport, like they maximize the value around keeping the planes in the air and serviced and and pilots flying. They don't maximize the customer experience, and it's extremely frustrating. I don't think anybody really likes to go through TSA and get on a plane, right? Like it's a pain in the ass.
I'm a pretty sick person, and I love it for some reason.
It's the same thing at the hospital, right? Like, and so like now think about that experience, and then just realize that when you focus on utilization, because they're maximizing doctors, they're maximizing pilots and planes, materials, right? When you focus on that, that's exactly the experience you're putting your customer through. And I've learned, I guess, over time now that, if you just kind of focus on like customer experience and make sure your customers, one, do the work that you're required to do, right? Get them the results that you're supposed to get them, but also make sure they have a good experience, that it's great for them. Things just sort of work out, without a ton of stress. And your people are happier, your customers are happier, they refer more people to you, you keep them retained for longer, right? Like, and it's all these intangible costs that you can't see on a P&L that are actually there. And so that was a long-winded way of saying that, but the forecasting is nice too, because once you do it enough, you can start to, I won't go too deep in this, but you can start to run what's called Monte Carlo simulations, where when a customer, customer asks for XYZ thing, like you can just run a model on it. And instead of telling them, just making up some number out of your ass of like, oh, we can get this to you by next Friday, right? Because I'm sure we've all said that, and we have no idea. And our ops people are always like, what do you mean next Friday? Like, where did you come up with that? And they make up the numbers half the time too, right? And but when you run a Monte Carlo simulation, you can say we have an 85% chance of completing this work item within 10 days, and because it runs a probabilistic model we usually run over like 1 million scenarios, and hey, it actually turns out to be right 85% of the time. So that's it's a much better way of forecasting and planning capacity and what you can actually do without overloading your team and lying to customers, or at least setting the right expectations with them.
Yeah, I think setting the right expectations is the most important thing for retention. Right, it's kind of on the scale of what was the expected experience in comparison to the actual experience. And I think you simplified it really well, is that you're putting the client request through the system as quickly and efficiently as possible. In order to get to that, what had to change in your organization is going from, let's say, the usual way that things are done within an agency to it might seem like a small shift, but structurally the way you organize your team, the way they communicate with clients, that all had to change. How did you implement that process? Like what actually had to take place within the organization for you to make that happen?
Yeah. So I'm sure it's going to vary by company. One thing I'll say is if you bill hourly, this will not work very well for you. That's a whole nother problem to kind of address internally. There may be some things that should be billed hourly, right? But I think for the most part, you should either bill, fixed cost and or value based. But some things that we learned and we very quickly implemented right off the bat that helped a ton was when you get into Kanban, one of the principles is you want to see your work, right? You want to have visibility of the work, and that means actually working in a legitimate Kanban, not in a list, right? So that way you see things moving left or right through a pipeline. It's backlog, to do, doing, done, or however you like. If we're doing content, there's like 12 different stages that it goes through. Okay, so that was. Being able to visually see the work and know where something is stuck at was a big one, because that at least lets you know where bottlenecks are. I think most people can implement that without any major heavy lift, depending on what project management system they're using. A lot of them have a list and a Kanban view that you can switch back and forth between. But a key thing that you'll learn about is what's called WIP, work in progress, and you usually put WIP limits on yourself. What you don't want to do is you don't want to put a WIP limit on yourself from the get-go. So what that means is you might say, okay, at any given time, each person should only have anywhere about 2 things in flight at any given time. That might be your theoretical limit. Do not try to do that from the get-go. What you're far better off doing is saying, just look at it from a Kanban view, continue to do the work as you do it, just like you normally would. And then reflect back on that work and say, okay, looking at how things move through each stage, right? Especially if you're working with a system that will give you the little timestamps on when it moves between columns. You then look to say, okay, what stage did it sit in the longest especially without any actual work being done? And you look at that area and you say, okay, why did that happen? Did it happen because we were waiting on a customer, waiting on feedback, right? Or, it's an external constraint that we can't control. Was it because, the training of the team wasn't where it needed to be, or somebody was too busy working on something else? Or was it because this person was juggling 7 different things, right? And they're constant context switching. And so it's just to be able to start with getting visibility of what's going on and identify some of the constraints, and just kind of ask yourself, okay, looking at these constraints, how might we solve this before we start to introduce WIP limits, right? So one of the things with customers, we were producing content and, we were waiting on feedback. Hey, do you approve this, et cetera, right? And, some industries it's going to be easier than others, right? But what we ended up doing, because everyone in their mind, every customer is like, oh yeah, I can definitely get that back to you in under 24 hours, or 48. But the truth of the matter is they don't start their week and go time block out time to review the content that you send them. Right. And it doesn't matter what you have in your MSA of here's how quickly you got to get back to us. So what we said, okay, how can we solve this problem? What could we do? Because when you think about it, when they actually sit down and review the content, it maybe takes them 20, 30 minutes, if that. And so we just started saying, okay, fine, we're going to block and we're going to meet with you every Friday, and we're going to do this together on a call. We're going to go through and review and get approval on this. And that did 2 things. One, it made sure that things were actually moving, continuing to move the way they needed to. It was when you put an event on your calendar, it's a meeting, that time is now locked in, right? They show up, the work gets done. The other thing too is it prevented a lot of the just unnecessary stuff that sometimes you'll get from clients on feedback, because you can enter the call and set the expectations of, here's what we're trying to accomplish as we edit this. Because I think sometimes, and again, this is specific to the world of content marketing, but you could run to this with web design or video editing, et cetera, right? Where you give a customer something to review, like a piece of content, and tell them to edit it. Most customers are not trained editors. Right? There's a way to edit content. There's different stages of editing, different types of editing. You have to kind of know what the writer's looking for, etc. Most writers or most customers are not trained editors, but everyone thinks that they are, just like everyone thinks that they can write when half the time what they're really doing is just hitting keys on a keyboard. And so what happens is you ask them to edit it, and they in their mind think, I have to provide feedback here, right? Like I have to do something. I don't know if it's like I need to assert control, or I need to assert my knowledge, or what, right? So getting on a call with them, streamline that a ton, because we can say, yeah, we're not here to talk about grammar. We're not here to talk about what we're looking is anything we said here not true? Or is anything in here that we need to dig deeper on? Do you have any anecdotes, any stories, any customer stories, any unique insights, opinions that we can add to really turn this into something more unique to you, right? And that really changes the dynamic of it. Because if you can get that part right, then when you give them, because we can all edit for grammar, it's not, we usually do that at the end, right? Then when you deliver it to them at the end, they're like, I love this. This is great. And so that ended up actually releasing a constraint towards the back end that we didn't even foresee, because then it improves the overall velocity of how long it takes to get everything approved and get it published. So again, finding some of the constraints is a big thing. And then over time, as you do that, one thing that we said was, okay, we understand how many things we have in flight. Let's see how long it takes for things to move through. So we want to see what's called departure rate. How long does it take from the time that something is in to the time that it's finished? And then we want to try to balance the departure rate with the arrival rate. So what we start to say is, okay, we're going to leave things in the backlog instead of adding things and starting new things. So that's the biggest one. Instead of starting something new, just focus on getting what's already in flight finished. And once you get a sense of, once you get it down to the point where it is maybe 2 or 3 things, again, depending on the team and the nature of your work and how quick your turnaround time is, right? You have to kind of figure this out for your own business. Once you get a sense of what that departure rate looks like, then you can start to say, as something leaves, I can now go pull something else off the top and bring it in. That way you have a balance of arrival and departure at a 1-to-1 ratio would be the ideal. It's not always going to be that way, but that's the biggest thing, is saying, let's not start anything new. Let's stop starting new stuff and let's start finishing what we already have in progress. Let's deliver this value to the customer because we already said we were going to. Let's just focus on getting that done. And I think most people could do that. And that means saying no to new requests, or just telling customers when they say, hey, can you do X, Y, Z? You could say, yes, but I can't start that. And if you don't, like, whatever time you think you could start it by, just multiply it by like 3. If it's like, I can get that done by next Friday, it's like, yes, but we can't start it for 3 weeks. And I think a lot of times we think that we have to tell our customers like, oh yeah, I can get that to you as soon as possible, because in our world, we think that we're extremely important to them, that we're a tiny, tiny, tiny little thing in their day, right? And if you just tell them, yes, but we've got to finish what we've already worked on for you. We want to get this done. That way, you get the value that you've already bought or paid for, or whatever we've said we were going to do for you. And we can start this in 2 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. I've yet to have anyone get pissed off or mad about that. They're like, okay, great. Sounds good. Yeah, and so it's like, it's getting over that mental hurdle of just being able to tell people like, yes, but I can't start until, X date.
Yeah. But I feel like most people don't want to be surprised, right? If they're running a business, they rely on you for some type of consistency that they're paying for, and your goal is to deliver it. So if that means it starts in 3 weeks, then that's a lot better than saying that, yes, we'll finish it by the end of the week, and then 3 weeks later, it's still not done. So
right.
I applaud you for setting up a process specifically for that, because a lot of times that doesn't happen. And it's like, I'm sure we've all had the friend that says yes to everything and is the one that backs out pretty much, the most.
Yeah, and I'm sure we've done it ourselves too, right? And it's not that we wanted to. It's just how it happens, right? So it's like, look at the behavior and change the behavior. Like, ask yourself, like, what's the root cause here? How do I change it? And again, I think a big part is just fear. It's fear of telling the clients either A, no, or yes, but. And they really don't care for the most part. Again, they just want to know. They want the thing done. And if it's something that's like really urgent, Okay, they'll let you know. They'll say, I really need this like this week. Is there any way we can expedite this? Right. And then there's your chance to make more margin. Just like, sure, 200% the cost. Right. And if it's really that urgent, they'll pay it. And we've done that for folks before. And, something that's normally $10,000 is all of a sudden $20,000. And hey, and it's fine. That's the point at which you can say, all right, fine. This now takes precedence. We will get this finished as soon as possible. Right. Because they're paying for it. And so we will expedite that through because you do get excess, you get plenty of extra margin from it. And again, that doesn't, once you do begin to double stuff like that, one, it won't happen all that often. And if it does, you're probably charging way too less to begin with anyway. So that's like a pricing problem there. And then two, it's if it's not really that urgent, they'll let you know because you're not saying no, you're giving them an option, and people want options and realistic expectations. So
there's a lot of things going back to discipline that you've implemented in your company. We spent a good amount of time talking about the operations, and I'm sure if we kept digging, we would continue to find more gold. But I do want to spend a little bit more time and talk about your positioning. And so in the intro, Josh mentioned you help B2B brands capture their total searchable market and accelerate go-to-market with a unique RevOps framework that lays on top of your existing HubSpot instance. Super specific. How did you get to that?
Yeah, I mean, we make people money is what we do. Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of words that basically amount to we make people money.
If it seems like you're hitting a specific niche with that.
We are. I mean, we've worked with a lot of different niches, and here for the past, I guess, year, we've primarily worked with other marketing agencies, actually marketing them because most of them are too busy to market themselves, or, they always say oh, I'm going to do it this year. I'm going to do it this month. And then it just never happens, right? Because there's always a client fire or, something else always comes up. They got to hire somebody or fire somebody or whatever. And so we found a pain point there and we started helping them. That said, we basically, every problem that we solve right now, it's just been a problem that we faced. And we just, if something doesn't exist to solve the problem, I'm going to build it. I'm just going to go build it. And I don't try to build anything that's not trying to launch software services here, right? We're primarily tech-enabled service. It just makes you more lean, faster, and you also get, price disparity because different industries value things in different ways. So that's something I think a lot of SaaS companies don't think about.
How did you niche down to marketing agencies? I think a lot of the listeners of this podcast are thinking through, they're going to take whatever business comes in. Then they get overwhelmed. And then how do you filter down and pick? How did that happen for you?
We had, so we used to compete with Chris Dreyer from Rankings.io back when we were focusing on lawyers and legal in that industry. And then I realized I hated working with lawyers. Lawyers are fine people. I just don't like work. I just don't like the space. I was like, okay, let's find something different. And he approached us and said, hey, I like you guys' content. I like what y'all do. I'd love if y'all did stuff for us. And so I said, sure, why not? Let's give it a go. And I mean, we're effectively now just creating content and doing SEO, and it turned into full blown marketing, like real marketing, where you're doing market research, brand strategy, et cetera. For a company that's just like ours to an extent, it's a marketing agency. We get it. We know it. There's nothing new to learn here. So we started doing that for him. And he already had a good brand to begin with, had a great solid foundation. He gets growth. One of the best agency owners that I'm lucky enough to know. And it was great working with him. And that's when we internally kind of had a chat and we're like, hey, we started working with another agency, doing some work for them. And then we realized, oh shit, we like working with other agencies because most of them just let us do what we do because they get it. Right. And they don't have to worry about, is this some freelancer who just doesn't get it, is just learned all their shit from Google or whatever. And it's we've, don't wrong. I learned from Google in the beginning, and then I started working on an MBA in marketing, and that's like a whole completely opened my mind to the world of marketing and all the shit I wish I would have learned, prior. But he knows that he can trust us, right? And other agencies got that too. We knew what to do, and so that's how we kind of just fell into that space. But that being said, I just came back from an event in Palm Springs with a group of like 30-ish agency owners, all doing anywhere between I think lowest is around like 4 million ARR, and highest is upwards of like 18 million. And we all come together. We just kind of open our books and problems and everything, and all kind of collaborate. And we had a speaker there who is getting ready to make an exit for $200 million, and they run an agency. And I did some thinking there afterwards, and I wonder sometimes, like, hey, have we limited our TAM here? So I think it's good to find your niche. I think it's like, hey, work with whoever. I get that. Like, you got to make money in the beginning, and you also got to figure out who you like working with and what industry you like. Especially if you're a founder who's actually still working in the business, like, you need to kind of like it to some extent in order to have the motivation to keep everyone else motivated. But that doesn't mean you have to always stay in it. So it's a good place to figure out what you like, what you're going to enjoy doing, but also be aware that as a founder, as a high performance individual, you are going to chase shiny objects. You are going to get bored easily. And sometimes you're going to say, well, let me change niches, let me change service offerings, let me add this new thing, because you get bored. But understand that your team isn't necessarily bored, and all you do is inject chaos into their lives and hurt your bottom line, frankly. And so just be aware of that as you are finding the niche that you like. Once things start to get boring, don't change. If it's making you money and it's consistent, just start hiring people to run your company at that point, and just let it make money, and you go solve whatever novel problems you want to on the side. But just let that thing start printing you money at that point, because that's when you know you've got something. So that's something I've had to do some reflection on, because we used to work in some more boring industries, and they made us plenty of money. And it reached a point where it's like we just got unpredictable results. It was just always working, and I was like, well, this is boring. Let me go solve some new novel problem. And and then revenue takes a dip, and so I have to think about my own ego, and I think everyone probably should to some extent, unless like you're just born to be a business god, right? Like, you just know this stuff, like Athena, the head of Zeus or something, like. And so we've been doing some reflecting on that, saying maybe we go back to boring to some extent, and just hire people and just let them grow the thing. So that's how I ended up with agencies, but that's how I've also, in beginning to kind of think about the expansion of our TAM as well. So,
Josh and I are spending a lot of time talking about community from this podcast, because we're interviewing marketing agency owners. And so you're scratching the surface of the next topic that we want to dive into, which is community. Marketing agencies tend to usually partner with other marketing agencies, because most clients, they just want one company to do it, but really it's a whole suite of services that no one is fully specialized in all of them. So I'll hand it over to Josh to dive into that. And then also, you mentioned what you're doing within your own company and how you build a community to take something that works, and then, as you said, like, start hiring and don't inject chaos. So Josh, I'll kick it over to you for those questions.
Yeah, no, and I think some of the last questions that we ask will address that. And I know we're coming up to the end of the time, so I want to get through all these. But before I even get to how you work with other agencies, I do want to spend another second in something else that's community, which is your employees. And last time we spoke, you mentioned that you're big into like internal education, and you mentioned that you put material out for free. And I think you said that 20% of your employees' time is for upscaling themselves. So I just really want to at least touch that bullet point and kind of say, like, what does that mean, and what does that mean to you?
Yeah, so I buy a ton of, I bought a ton of courses over the years, and anything I buy, everybody else gets to learn from and use. And I share it with plenty of other agency owners all the time too, which I'm sure much to the chagrin of the people who create the course. And I get it. I get it. But it is what it is. So the internally, so like a lot of the material I've been sharing lately is frankly just from like the actual MBA, working on MBA in marketing, and that's been a whole game changer. But internally, what we do is we say, hey, and not everybody is able to. We want to make sure people know that they have the freedom to do it, and we really encourage it. And to some extent, we have to kind of enforce it because otherwise, people will just work on more client work. But the way that people get better over time is improving their skills and/or learning new things. That's how you get a career advancement. I don't expect people to stay here forever. If you want to move on to something else, like I'm glad to be a stepping stone. Completely fine with me. But we encourage people to spend at least one day a week where it's focused on learning something new. And then usually it's going to be usually towards the end of the month. We'll do a day where one person is taking and teaching other people. And I really like to the point where we're basically doing that every week. It's just how do we balance that too with like the individual like learning time? Because I think I don't want to force people to learn things that they don't want to learn. I think you're better off exploring. That's the whole point, is like self-improvement, whether it's, I wouldn't care if I walked in there and somebody was learning, something completely irrelevant to our business, which I can't really think of anything off the top of my head of what that would be. But, I've got folks who are, by trade on the more sort of engineering side, and they're over here learning stuff in Adobe Illustrator or Photoshop, right? Like just because they were interested, they want to see what it was about. So we try to encourage people to spend at least one day a week. And then, like I said, if we don't see people doing that, like we just kind of clear off their calendar if we have to manually and just say, hey, learn today, go explore something. And then, like I said, we have people teach once a month, and that also kind of helps with the to make sure that people are doing it. We also run a pretty small team, so it's not too hard right now. I can imagine it being more difficult at scale, but it's something I think I remember reading that Google does that. And I look at Google and say, well, I'm not a $900 billion company, so maybe there's something there. But yeah, it's a big fan of education. I mean, we're not called Audit and Growth for nothing. So it's about learning and growing. So.
I actually think it's more impressive with a small team, because that's when you need even more hands on deck. And you almost could think that it's harder to squeeze in 20% time of just learning. So I would be
too focused on utilization and tracking time instead of just getting shit done.
Touche. So yeah, not to tie, I have some questions at the end, and it's really going to tie to, again, kind of that community and how you can work with other agencies, because that's what we're trying to do with this community is, again, start this referral network and everything. So how can you work with other marketing agencies, or, what services can you partner with other agencies? So in other words, what do agencies tend to reach out to you for?
It's usually one of two things. So some of them reach out to us who actually just want us to do their marketing. That's one. We have like limited bandwidth and capacity on that, and we tend to charge a shit ton of money that most agencies don't really have the budget for. But hey, if you're there, like, let us know. But a lot of them also reach out to us whenever we don't do client work for them, but we will help them leverage our tech. So again, like we have a front-facing version of our software that we've built that just rapidly speeds things up. Something used to take like 3 to 6 weeks, we can do in like half a day now. So even though we have a front-facing version, we don't make it public to people. So it's a tech-enabled service. So sometimes agencies will reach out to us and say, hey, it's everything from like the keyword research process all the way to planning. We built an algorithm that basically tells them how do you know what content to create in what order to get the best results in the least amount of time, and with like a high degree of accuracy and forecasting it out and all that stuff. And so they'll come to us and say, hey, I'm at a pinch, I need to get this done. Like, can we hire you to do it? And we'll do that for agencies a lot of times whenever they need help there. And then of course refer them work too whenever people are looking for stuff that we just flat out don't do. A good example, sometimes we'll just help people close deals. We worked with this one agency earlier this year who they'd pitched this company, and I think they were pitched on like $400K was like what they were the deal size. And the company was less than impressed with what they came with, and they're a solid company. The agency they're great. It's just they were kind of playing in a different realm. It's one of the larger accounts they were going after, and so they hit me up and was asked like, "Hey, can you help with this?" And so I took a look at what they were doing. I ran some data for them. We did it in I was like, "Yeah, when do you need it by?" And they said, ASAP. And I was like, "Well, I can get it to you in 2 days. Does that work?" And they said, "Sure." So we ran some data. I took their sales deck. It was like a I'm sure we've all seen this or done this ourselves, right? Where we think we got to put every damn thing in the sales deck, and it's like a 30 to 60 page sales deck. And I basically just stripped it all out, and I gave them a 7-page deck. It's all about narrative, right? It's like, how do you weave the story? How do you just, you don't have to, if they ask questions, want to go in detail, sure, have that data, back it up, but keep your executive summary to like 6-7 slides. Keep it like, here's where you're at. Here's what you said you want to be. Here's what it's going to take. And here's why. And this is what the upside looks like. There's the investment. Do you want to do this? Right. It's simple as that. Right. But we've tell a good story with when you do it, but, they ended up closing that deal for, I took their $400K out and I said, this is a $1.8 million deal. And so they closed their first multi-million. They closed it at 1.8. So that was,
that's
okay. There you go. So, that's a one-off. That doesn't always happen, but, they had a good opportunity, a good client with good budget that had a ton of opportunity and was very aggressive and had funding and everything like that. And so it definitely, right timing, but, we've helped people like that before, but I don't know. I mean, if anybody needs anything, I probably know an agency that can help them. So they can always reach out. And I'm sure I know somebody. I've got a massive network of the people that I work with. That I think there's a really interesting opportunity of agencies to be able to tap into each other's resources. I mean, talent is scarce, and labor arbitrage is real, right? So being able to not have to build stuff from scratch yourself and just have somebody that you can work back and forth to, I think is there's just nothing really good out there, which maybe that's what you folks are working on of a way to facilitate the, I mean, Slack is one thing, right? But it's like, it's not organized. You don't, sometimes people have opinions and you're like, yeah, but I need to see it. I need to know like kind of what you do, because your reputation's on the line too. So if there was something to facilitate that would probably help a lot of agencies out.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, in short, that's what we're trying to do. And you actually highlight a lot of things that we're kind of doing on the brainstorm side, which is we're not just trying to be a mastermind. We're not just trying to be a Slack. We want to be the people that maybe put in a little bit of work so that you don't have to, just to make sure that the referrals are going clean and we're not muddying up a Slack channel or anything like that. So, I mean, I couldn't have said it better than you did. Exactly.
Marketplace.
Yeah.
I like
yes, it. Exactly. Now I'm going to turn that question. You actually started answering it a little bit, but to get the full answer, if a client asks you, "Can you do this?" and it's a service you don't currently provide, how do you typically handle that request?
I just say no.
Really? So not like.
I mean, if I don't, I say we don't do that. I'm happy to make a referral to you. I don't white label people. I don't. That just adds more headache on our end half the time, because you still have to do the account management, which is its own, there's lots of complexity there. So I usually just refer them to somebody and be like, nope, I don't do that, but here's somebody who does, and make an introduction and say, I usually treat it as like, here, we have a strategic partner we work with on things like this. That way it's not just like, I'm not just referring to this person. This is someone we specifically partner with. We built trust, right, with the client. They trust our opinion, right? I'm like, we know how to work with them. They know how to work with us. They're great. Matter of fact, there's like, for example, sometimes people like SaaS companies will come to us sometimes and want us to crunch this data for them. And then they always want the content produced after the fact. Well, we don't produce content for SaaS companies. But we have plenty of agencies that do, right? And we have one who has worked with our data before, who knows how to interpret our data, who we've ran data for their own customers, right? They get it. And we're like, hey, no, we don't do that. But this agency over here, they work with our tech. We train them. They're great. They're solid. Let me make an intro, right? And then they, get a full-blown contract out of it too. And everybody's happy. So it's kind of like know your lane and just build up a network of people that you can trust, that do the things that you don't do and don't want to do, and don't want to build out in your own company. So
yeah, perfect. And I know we're at the Diva, just a few more minutes.
I got plenty of time. I'm good.
All right, cool. I appreciate that. If you were listening to this show, what topics would you want us to cover?
Oh, let's see. I think diving more into something that I think is lacking a lot out there is everything that goes into thinking about building enterprise value, which maybe not be, that's not necessarily going to be a good fit for your podcast if it's more community focused, but I would definitely love more content around how do we build enterprise value, which is sometimes through the network that you build and the team that you built, as well as along with all your assets, et cetera. But anything around enterprise value and or anything around attracting talent predictably. I think that's the next. We're putting people in place now to run this because I get bored with things, right? Like I was talking about earlier. And so once those people are in place, like that's my next problem to go tackle is how do we think about building systems that predictably attract the right type of talent to your organization? So
those are great. Yeah, no, I think those are great.
So it's funny that you mentioned that. We actually have an episode coming up where we're specifically going to talk about enterprise value. I'm trying to find the name of the guest.
I wasn't sure if that was him or if that was someone else that brought that
It's
up.
Aaron Gayer of GDX Studio. He specifically on our discovery call, that's everything that he drove into was how to build enterprise value. And he talked about positioning your the people that you hire as PLUs, which are people like us, looking for team players, create value for them. And then he has these buckets for the people that he hires that he wants them to fill that defines his culture. And those buckets are personal, professional, and financial growth that he helps them work on. And so that's it's interesting that you mentioned those two things because those are the two things that he specifically focused on. And and then with enterprise value, it's just how do you build value within the company so that if and when, whether you decide to sell it, there's a lot of value there with employees that are trained and will likely stick around and provide value to whoever acquire them. But even if you don't sell, you have a company that you enjoy working in. So I don't know when he's scheduled for, but I'm sure it's going to be within the next month or two that we're talking about that.
I'll have to check it out. There's something I've been thinking about lately where you've got, it's easy to look at the equation for enterprise value, like, oh, there it is. It's that simple. And it's like, well, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of variables that go into all of that when you unpack it right. And, everything from like predictable customer acquisition, predictable revenue, like risk mitigation across different revenue sources, like, brand equity, which not enough people actually talk about. Like they talk about brand equity like it's just like a amorphous thing. It's like, no, like you can put it on the P&L. Like there's a financial calculation for brand equity, right? So like, and I don't think a lot of agencies really think about brand, like building their own brand. But then, and I thought like I was learning a decent amount about it in the event I went to where this person's exiting for $200 million. He gave us a 9-page printout from Excel where he went through talks with like 9 different PE firms. And he basically just over time consolidated all the questions they were asking him. And, if it was duplicate questions, like combine them in one, it's a 9-page spreadsheet of very small print of just these hundreds of questions across the various areas of your business that these PE firms would ask him in 9 different ways, over and over and over again. And I've bought 2 businesses, 2 agencies previously, and I'm thinking, I didn't do this level of due diligence when I bought these agencies, and I'm thinking, shit, like there's, I wish I'd have had this then, right? But I also think about if you operate your business in such a way that it is sellable, whether you want to sell it or not, it's a great way to operate the business. Can you just sell it to yourself the next year, right? Just keep selling it to yourself by holding your position. But it definitely puts you in a good position over time. But a big thing he brought up, and a lot of people may not want to hear this, and maybe this is something you can talk to your guest about, but every PE firm, so he runs a 500-person company, and they're all 98, 95% of them are all located in one area, working out of the same building. So they're not remote. And I know there's, the whole big push around remote, and I think there's pros and cons to it. I think it's telling that Zoom has called its own employees back into the office. But he said every single PE firm would ask about what percentage of people are remote, what's the policy on remote work, how do you do it, et cetera. And a big thing that they wanted to see was basically if you're remote, valuation drops. They wanted companies that were not remote to invest in, and because in terms of valuation, and I think that's interesting, and definitely goes against the current zeitgeist, but It's not a problem we have. I tell everyone they can work remote and they just keep coming to the office anyway. So I'm like, well, okay, here we are. So, but I think maybe when you talk to them, see if he's got any thoughts on that. I'd be interested in hearing what other people have to say and think about on the subject.
Absolutely. I added to our list of questions for him.
I'm glad you did that. Yeah, I thought I was having deja vu for a little bit there. I'm glad, Alex, you remembered who said that. And just to quickly add a quick note, my other job is I work in M&A, and it's amazing how many people think that revenue is kind of like the biggest thing and the only thing that matters when trying to sell your company. And, they don't even think about profit, or you just mentioned remote workers, or how long the transition is going to take, or especially in marketing agency world, are those customers going to retain, and how many and what percent and all that kind of stuff. And I think when people ignore a lot of that, they just think about top line, and even bottom line. And it's not about just bottom line. Yeah, sure. Bottom line is going to be maybe factor number one in this, but that's, I'm making percentages up, but that's only 60%, right? Like or 49%, let's say.
That's the table stakes, right? Like that's right. That's whether or not it's even worth entertaining the conversation.
Well said. Exactly. So, where we're at, we're a couple more questions. Are you guys looking to hire any positions right now?
Oh, I would always love to find just a rock star COO, I think. Or, just anyone who's just solid at ops. That's a big one for us. We're actively looking for editors, always looking for editors, content editors. And those are probably the two biggest ones. I think that would be great right now for us in particular. So
you're killing me. I had a whole set of questions for COOs, and I was like, man, we're not going to get to them. We're blasting through time right now anyway. So for the next one, last question, any book, podcast, or newsletter recommendations? And that can be in business and marketing. It doesn't have to be really anything you want to share.
Yeah, best. Carol Dweck, Growth Mindset is great. But on the business side, Playing to Win by Roger Martin, one of the best books that I've read. It's there's two types of, some people like it, some people hate it. If you can kind of get past a lot of the P&G examples, Procter & Gamble, it's one of the most, it completely changed the way that I think about business and strategy. That one's absolutely fantastic. He has a newsletter on Medium that's also worth reading. So Roger L. Martin, he was the dean of the Rothman School of Business, and I think it's Canadian. And then so that's a good one. Newsletters, Category Pirates, Christopher Lochhead has a wonderful newsletter. I always enjoy what they have to say over there. It's a nice. That one's pretty solid. And then anything by Mark Ritson or Rory Sutherland. That's if I were to tell people, it's like Roger L. Martin, Rory Sutherland, Mark Ritson, and Christopher Lochhead, which is kind of the antithesis to some of them, but it's a good balance. Those are four that like not many people I think in the regular everyday agency world know of, but people who are people in marketing know who they are. So Roy's the head of Ogilvy, and Mark did the branding for LVMH and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, those are four I would definitely check out.
I appreciate that. You might be the first one to actually said newsletter ones, which I think is like the most consumable short version.
Oh yeah. I love Substack.
I'm surprised no one brings it up. As we come up to the end of the episode, I just want to give you an opportunity to mention how people can find you and anything else you'd like to end with.
LinkedIn is probably the easiest place to find me. I forget that most other channels exist half the time. So, I mean, they're great for customers, right? Like, but LinkedIn's probably the best place to find me, or that's pretty much it. Slack communities. Anyways, I'm across several of them, but Superpath is a great one, and Vault community. Lots of those, but LinkedIn, best place.
Yeah, I had a whole load of questions about the community, other communities you're into, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And for those of you who've learned something new from this episode, please consider giving us a like or a follow so we can continue getting the highest quality guests. And as always, thank you for listening, Skyler. Dude, this was a power hitter of an episode, man. I'm going to go back and listen to this like 3 times, so I appreciate it.
Hey, enjoyed it, Alex. Enjoyed it, Josh.
Thanks for listening to the Masters in Marketing Agency podcast. I hope you got a ton of value out of this episode. And before we go, I just want to thank our sponsors, DevNoodle. DevNoodle provides marketing agencies with the ability to offer their clients unlimited website design, build, and management services with fixed monthly plans. If website design, development, and maintenance is holding your agency back from growing, please reach out to us at devnoodle.com, where we make websites easy for you and easy for your clients. devnoodle.com.